Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Is this on? Can you hear me okay? Good morning. My name is Donny Jack. On behalf of the Scottish Government and our mission here in DC, I'd like to welcome you to this conference on cultural diplomacy. This event represents Scotland's contribution to the EU Month of Culture. I have to confess that when we were planning this event some time ago, we were slightly worried and apprehensive about the number of people we might secure. Never having organised an event like this before, we thought we'd be lucky if we reached 75. Well, clearly our expectations have been well and truly exceeded, and I'm delighted that there are so many of you here to join us this morning. A key point I take from that is that this demonstrates that there really is an appetite for engaging and sharing best practice on this important topic. As a very small diplomatic mission, we are only a team of 4, we face a number of challenges in trying to make our presence felt in what is a very cluttered cultural landscape. And whilst we've had some successes, I believe that by using this forum this morning to share knowledge across a range of nations and to explore the benefits of partnership working, we can all achieve much more. Today we are joined by a number of distinguished guests whose profiles are outlined in the booklet. And we're extremely grateful to all of them for their willingness to participate in this event. And we look forward to hearing what each guest has to say. Before I hand over the conference to Professor Nick Cull, let me briefly run through the programme. After Nick has said a few words, we will be addressed by our keynote speaker, Alicia Adams of the Kennedy Centre for the Performing Arts. Alicia and Nick will then have what we term a fireside chat, albeit, as you can see, there is no fireside. And then will be a short Q&A session before we break for coffee. After coffee, our cultural advisor, Sarah Franken, will introduce Nick properly, and then Nick will help us contextualise our understanding of cultural diplomacy, and then we will hear 3 case studies from Sweden, Peru, and the United Kingdom. This will be followed by a final Q&A session, brief closing remarks, and then we will end with our international lunch. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Nick Cull. Nick is Professor of Public Diplomacy at the University of Southern California, where he directs the Public Diplomacy Master's Programme. But one has only to read his extensive CV to get a real understanding of the breadth and depth of his knowledge and expertise in this field. His prodigious output in terms of books, research papers, articles, conference presentations, and media work is absolutely astounding. And although I don't know how he manages to find all the time to do everything, I'm delighted that he has found the time to be here with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Nick Cull.
Thank you, Donny, and thank you very much for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here as somebody who has worked on, I've been involved in the study of cultural diplomacy for a long time. I'm really touched to see the level of turnout we have for this event. I think it's a mark of the extent to which people are now embracing cultural diplomacy and understanding it as an approach whose time has come. And I'm particularly heartened that we're going to have a conversation today that focuses on cultural diplomacy not as being a way in which single countries can introduce themselves to the world as a form of one-upmanship, saying, don't you wish your country had a culture like mine, but rather a way in which we're now talking about partnership through culture, partnership in culture, and being more than we are at the moment through connections in the field of culture. So putting culture to work as a diplomatic force for our common and mutual benefit. And I'll say more about that later on. But it's a pleasure to be here and be part of this conversation here and to see similar conversations breaking out at other places around the world. It's an exciting moment to be interested in cultural diplomacy, and thank you for being part of that conversation today. And so I now pass over to Alicia.
I'm delighted to be here and was very excited about doing this when Sarah Franklin invited me to participate in this, and that it was being held at the NYU downtown campus was also bonus, as I'm an NYU alum. So I've never been here before, so I'm not a good alum, obviously. But I am here today. I'm the Vice President for International Programming and Dance at the Kennedy Center, and I curate the major festivals. Currently, we have the Irish Festival that is happening. But I just want to, in my 20-plus years at the Kennedy Center, want to take you through how we have dealt with cultural diplomacy, cultural exchange, cultural advocacy at the Kennedy Center, giving some very specific examples, but also I will give you some background on the Kennedy Center. So, and I'm in charge of this also. So this is got it. That's the Kennedy Center. The John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts is the National Center for the Performing Arts, created with authorizing legislation in 1958 and came into existence in 1971. The Kennedy Center grew out of many legislative attempts to create a cultural center in Washington for the purpose of presenting the best of our arts and culture and to receive the best from abroad. DC had no proper theater, only a movie house to use for such presentations and special international performances. It was named as the living memorial to President Kennedy when he died in 1963 because of his involvement in the plans for creating this National Cultural Center and also in the arts. Our congressional mandate is that we put on our stages and in our halls the best in terms of the performing arts and education, and that it reflect the cultures of the people of this country, a nation of immigrants, and therefore a very multicultural country. So we look around the world to bring content for our program, to explore the multicultural heritage of America. America extends itself into the world, and the world extends to America. This conference is about partnerships, collaborations, cultural diplomacy, and how we can all work together and how we do all work together. That the United States lacks a Ministry of Culture means that when we work internationally with other governments, with ministries of culture, international agencies, and artists, we are a nonprofit that has to raise funds and for performances on our stages. So we aren't the government agency that we are sometimes perceived to be, but essentially become the de facto Ministry of Culture when we work directly with these governments. We become part of the State Department's soft power or cultural diplomacy efforts around the world as we work with governments and artists from various countries to bring them to the United States for presentations and cultural exchange projects. We want to develop relationships with people, artists, and governments to start a conversation that we hope will continue long after there is a specific festival or event. In order to be able to create programs at the highest level, we must leverage resources, develop partnerships, create opportunities that will be beneficial to all involved. The arts are the best tool that we have for bringing people together. And my vision for these festivals is to share the arts and culture of various countries, continents, and regions with the United States and the world. To bring to America, to share those arts and cultural aspects, including the performing arts, music, dance, theater, visual arts, literature, food, design, film, and fashion, as they provide many windows onto the cultures. It also provides very real ways to debunk stereotypes that may exist about people or countries in various parts of the world. More than the media, this is the best way, I think, to tell stories. In doing this work, it is essential that we be aware of the political realities, such as war, terrorism, elections, and all kinds of things that might be going on in a country when you are trying to work and do business with that country. We also have to be sensitive to cultural differences and to be ready to learn, to be ready for the pitfalls. There are always challenges with visas, sorting out tax codes and treaties, cargo, artists, or luggage not arriving on time, bridging gaps in knowledge of the arts, and audiences in America. The fun is designing these festivals, meeting the people, learning the history, and developing the relationships, creating the narrative, and then hopefully, and usually, the success. The ultimate goal, to make a difference, to have audiences learn something new, to introduce new ideas, innovation, and creativity, to bring beauty, as well as to challenge our audiences with provocative arts, to celebrate the diversity and cultures of the world. I will just use a few of the festivals that I have curated over the years to tell some of the stories about the work, about the partnerships, which each of these festivals, we partner with our education program at the Kennedy Center and the Millennium Stage, which is the free stage where we often use to place artists so that we reach a larger audience and begin to expose it in a way where people do not have to pay to have access. We want to reach maximum audiences and also to engage with the local community, artists, teachers, students, etc. So we'll pull the lever on all those mechanisms for the festivals in order to have that happen. Let's see. And I'm going to start, if I can make this work, with China. China is a festival that we did in 2005, and the work began on it in 2001. It took many years in order to make this festival happen. It required 15 trips to develop the relationship and trust to represent the culture of this vast country in America. When I first started working on China and realized it is 1.2 billion people and that there are so many cultures that represent and reflect this nation, I was worried about how I would get my arms around it. The government was interested in showing the new China. Many negotiations about appropriate programs to bring. I wanted to debunk the stereotype of made in China as a negative, meaning something that had little or no value. I wanted to premiere in DC the great art and artists of China. Sensitivities to including Chinese Americans at the time were very high, but I fought very hard to have that happen because it was important that Chinese Americans who still claim their Chinese heritage were able to be a part of it. A young fellow who we had at the Kennedy Center, his name is Pan Young, was tremendously interested in helping to make this happen. And I would say that without him, without somebody from the country working directly with me, it would have been much more difficult than it ended up being. I also used a consultant to help me be culturally appropriate and to interpret the situations that would and did occur. We continued to present Chinese artists since 2005 and created an annual Lunar New Year's celebration, which serves now as a platform to continue. 900 artists came in 2005, and American agents toured most of the companies. I will say about China is that this relationship endures. We continue to work with the government, but there are many more agents and people that were involved in making this whole event a success. It was over a 4-week period of time that we had this festival. Arabesque, the arts and culture of the Arab world. This was a festival that we held. It was at the height of distrust between the regions, between the United States and the Arab region between 2006 and 2009. I had to convince the artists and the people there that the Kennedy Center was not the agent of the government, but was an independent, nonprofit organization that was interested and wanted the artists' voices. 800 came and participated. One of the things that I did in order to make this happen was to sort of fly under the radar for this and not deal directly with the ministries of culture at all times, but to go directly to the artist to make the case that we really were interested in presenting the art and culture of these countries, and we're not interested in the negative and the politics that were going on. And that seemed to be something that worked. And one way, when I was working on this festival, I went to many, many museums, and I often collaborate with museums in order to do this work. And I realized that in just about every museum, there was a wedding dress. And there were beautiful wedding dresses with gold and all kinds of adornments. And what I thought was that one of the things that I needed to do at the Kennedy Center was to bridge the gap in the knowledge of this culture and to do something that was accessible or known to everybody. So I created an exhibition of the 22 countries of wedding dresses that lined the Hall of States, which is one of the longest halls in any cultural institution, and the Hall of Nations. And what I saw was that people stopped and they looked and they asked questions of an Arab or Muslim standing next to them about it, something that would not necessarily have happened. And what that served to do was to break down some of the barriers and to raise the curiosity of the people, which is what I wanted to have happen. Another thing, I mentioned that the use of Chinese Americans was not what necessarily the government officials wanted to have happen, but I thought it was very important. And what happened, we did this festival in 2005. In 2008 were the Olympics, where they used Zhang Yimou and Zhu Bing and the dance company that I'm not remembering, to do the Shenwei, to create the opening ceremony for the Olympics, because they too were able to learn more about their artists that were living abroad. So it was something that I was very proud of, to have made that introduction and for them to have embraced it. Maximum India, another festival that I curated. This is an epic country. It's 24 languages, over 1 billion people. And what I thought was really quite interesting was there are 300 ways to cook a potato. It's a country that is both classical and contemporary. We tried to partner with their international organization, which is called the Indian Council on Cultural Relations. With all of these countries, the government does not determine who the festival will represent. It is the Kennedy Center that maintains the ultimate curatorial control. India is very used to dealing with other governments and selecting artists to create an India year in Russia or an India year in France. And so we're not used to working in a curatorial style. So this really presented a very difficult problem for us, because we have to walk a line in terms of bringing what is representative and reflective of a culture, and also what will be accessible to our audiences. And that is a very fine line. We do want to challenge, we do want to make sure that what we bring is representing and is authentic. What I had to ultimately do, because it was such a hard push with ICCR, was to allow them to curate 10 evenings on the Millennium Stage. And with that, I gained control of the rest of the festival, and we were able to maintain a very cordial relationship and an ongoing relationship. After the festival, they were very surprised, because they said they would never have curated in the way that it was curated. We had 400,000 people to come to this event, which is the largest that we've ever had. We collaborated with hotels to bring chefs. We had 17 chefs from the Taj Hotel. We've never had such interest in the food service at the Kennedy Center as we did during this festival. It was really quite amazing, and just a wonderful group of artists. I'm not showing these festivals in any particular order. They certainly are not chronological by year. Nordic Cool 2013. We collaborated with the embassies, we collaborated with the Nordic Council of Ministers. And they came to me. It doesn't usually happen like this, where they come to me, the cultural attachés, and say, we want you to do our festival. But that's exactly what they did. They came to me and said, we want you to do a festival about the Nordic region. And we have watched all the festivals that have happened heretofore, but we think it's important for you to show Northern Europe. And so I thought about it. They were interested in raising the profile of the Nordic countries in America, which I must say had been very low, but for a reason, I think. The embassy's interest really attracted my interest as I began to go to more events at the embassies and to discover more about these countries. The Nordic values of sustainability, gender equality, innovation, right to arts education for every child, respect for nature, good design, were very meaningful to me. And they were very meaningful also to the Nordic Council of Ministers that we were partnering with. Writers also had expertise in crime literature, which I found very, very fascinating, because there almost no crime, or at least there used to be. When I was working on this, there was no crime in the Nordic region. But there is this fascination. They've created some of the most interesting crime novels in the world. By the time I was doing the festival in 2013, they were sort of over the crime bit and weren't necessarily interested in having crime novels talked about in any serious way, but I thought it was real important to do it, so we were able to include that as part of the festival as well. Perhaps more than any other international festival, Nordic Cool manifests the intersection of life and nature, art and culture. The values that the Council of Ministers were interested in conveying were quite easily expressed through the arts, as the artists were so invested in them. Impact of this festival included the introduction to the House of Cards. I don't know if you've seen the House of Cards. When it opens, there's one scene where you see actually the Kennedy Center. And that's because we put the Nordic lights, we did a light exhibition on the Kennedy Center that lasted the 3 weeks of the festival. So that will go on in perpetuity, and something I'm really, really, really proud of. And also the Nordic Council is looking to model this festival. One of the things I didn't know was that these 5 countries had never worked together before in this way and had their artistic and cultural content displayed as part of a whole. But I think from this festival, it was realized that this was a very impactful way, that alone they could not make the same impact as we were able to when they were all together. So that is being modeled, and as I understand it, in the UK, I'm not sure what year, they will be, in 2017, certainly the South Bank will be doing a festival similar to what the Kennedy Center did. And Jude Kelly, who runs the South Bank, gave me a call, and she says, I'm in the Faroe Islands. I hear that you've been here too. So, it was great to hear that. I have a clip that I will show you of that festival at the end of this talk. But it was a great festival that exposed people to the Nordic countries in a way that they had not been in the past. Eye on Edinburgh, on the French. This is a festival, a mini festival that I did. I was very interested. I also curate a program called Something New. And Sarah Franklin, who is here, invited me many times to go to the Edinburgh Festival to see the programs. And so one of the things I was very interested in was bringing some of those artists to the Kennedy Center. Edinburgh Fringe Fair is not quite the fair that you know the Kennedy Center for, but it's work that I think is very important. It's edgier work. It's work that that challenges us in new ways. And so I decided to do this mini festival based on the bringing the artists from many of the different Fringe festivals that I had been to. And of course, that partnership was with the British Council. in order to make that happen. African Odyssey was done in the 90s, actually. It was at a time when the USIA existed, which was the United States Information Agency, and they were really the cultural arm of the State Department at that time. They were enormously helpful, they were knowledgeable, and at the time that I was doing this festival, there were not many African artists that had visited the United States. So it was the help of the USIA, the State Department, the Ford Foundation that was also very interested in this happening. And so we were able to, so it helped me in terms of introducing me to the continent through the staff and embassies abroad. I wanted to focus on the contemporary work, including fashion, to debunk the myths and stereotypes about the various countries in Africa. And so I was able to bring contemporary work, and people were very surprised. It was very interesting to see in the audience were a lot of people from the Peace Corps or people who had worked in Africa as part of the State Department over the years and felt very attached and wanted to reconnect with African arts and culture. One of the things that we decided to do, and I partnered with a couple of organizations in New York to make this happen, was that we realized that there needed to be, this is 1995, 97 when we were doing this, that the African artists needed to be more market ready. And so the artists needed to be more market ready, but also the presenters needed to be more able to understand the culture of the African nations. And so we created a handbook, which was a guide that we distributed both in French and in English to all of the countries through the embassies, but also to all of the artists that were involved, because our goal was to make this happen again in the future, and for these artists to be able to gain some knowledge so that they would be more accessible. I mean, one of the things that used to happen, this could never happen now, is that they would say, we have no cargo. But they would come with stuff that they had friends working for the airline, so they could get it onto the plane, and they would arrive, and then they would have to go back. But there was no carnet that existed, and they didn't have friends in the United States that were going to put the stuff back on the plane for, however they did it. And so those kinds of things just could not continue to happen if they were going to be viable. Of course, that meant more money to be spent, but it's a necessary thing for them to learn. It was a great time. It was more of a series over a 4-year period of time. And each year we did 10 days. And in that 4-year period, we represented 44 of the then 54, there may be 55 countries now in Africa as part of it. And it was from North, South, Central, and East Africa. And it was really the work that I did in Africa that gave rise to my interest in doing the Arab Festival, because I had brought many artists from Northern Africa, from Morocco we had partnered, and from Egypt. We also worked with the Getty Conservation Institute. They were working on ancient African paintings of the ancient African paintings. And they are conservators, so they were looking in places in South Africa to find these. But they really didn't have an outlet for their work, so we were the perfect partner for them. They had the content, and we created an exhibition then where we could show off the work of the Getty Conservation Institute. The Barbican had been a part of something called Africa 95, and they had an extraordinary exhibition of textiles. So we partnered with them to bring that exhibition to the Kennedy Center to be one of the highlights of the festival. And I guess the thing that had the most lasting effect, and I'll tell you the story quickly, is with the Handspring Puppet Company. They are the company that created the puppets for Warhorse. But I worked with them many, many years ago to develop a piece called Zarafa that was about a giraffe being given by the King of Egypt to the King of France the Sultan of Egypt to the King of France in the 1800s, and all that went along with that. And for this meant these handspring puppet guys would have to create large-scale puppets that they had never created before. We connected them with the Malian puppet company called the Sogolon Puppet Company, and we began to work. We had people from all over the world working on this project. The Kennedy Center was not able to carry it through, so it was given back to the Handspring Company to develop. That became a piece called Tall Horse, which did tour. But what happened was that the National Theatre in the Royal National Theatre in the UK was very impressed with these puppets, and so they wanted to work with the Handspring puppet guys again, Adrian and Basil. And so they contacted them and asked them were they interested, and they were. And finally they found this project, which is called Warhorse, and we all know what happened with that. So I take some credit for having helped that along. We work with the Royal Court Theatre. This is a picture from a Ugandan piece, but I don't think it's the one I'm talking about, a Ugandan piece. We did work with the Ugandan National Theatre to create a piece. We didn't create a piece. The Royal Court was working with them to do Mother Courage. And so that was of interest when we were doing African Odyssey. We brought Mother Courage here, and it was a three-way relationship to make that happen. And it was done in Lugandan, which had to be translated. Iberian Suite. We started doing that again. The Nordic Cool was about Northern Europe. Iberian Suite was about Southern Europe. One of the things that I have tried to do with these festivals is to go to places where the Kennedy Center had not been before, places that are underrepresented on our stages. And with Iberia, as I got into it with Spain and Portugal, I realized that they were, and they also told me, that they were the first global countries since the 1600s, which is very true. And they went all over the world. They did bad things, but they also did good things. And what we decided to do was to not just do Spain and Portugal, but also to include artists from those parts of Africa, like Mozambique, that were part of the Portuguese diaspora, out of Latin America, there Brazil, as well as Spanish-speaking America, and Asia, out of India, out of China. Because the story I was interested in telling was about the global arts remix. These sailors, these adventurers, actually changed the DNA for the world. And in terms of arts and culture, helped to create new mixes, new kinds of work with the blend of the work that they met from the artists and the people that they met in the New World. The ukulele is a good example. It's a Portuguese instrument, and it went to the Philippines, to Hawaii, in the 1800s, and the Hawaiians loved this instrument, and they adopted it as their national instrument. But they otherwise would never have known about it. The beautiful Spanish shawls that you see actually are made by the Filipino women that the Spanish then brought back on their ships. The Spanish learned to make them. But those kinds of cross-cultural exchanges are things that have become very interesting to me, and I think very important, because I do think that we share a cultural heritage that is very important to understand. And if you get your DNA done, you'll see that you're really a mix of a lot of things. And what we're working on right now is a festival called Ireland 100, which is happening as we speak. And we were asked to help celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the Easter Rising that was in 1916, which essentially was Ireland's independence. And we usually don't work in this way where we're approached by a government and asked to do something. We usually figure out what we want to do culturally, and then we go to to the government. And I'm talking about government a lot, but government doesn't really play, our government or these governments don't play a huge role in the ultimate selection. I certainly want to gather the input, but not necessarily to have that being controlled. And so I really work very hard to make sure that doesn't happen. But we collaborated with the Embassy of Ireland here, with Culture Ireland in Dublin, with the Irish Arts Centre in New York, the Fishamble Theatre in Dublin, to create something called the Tiny Plays. They had done a piece called the Tiny Plays for Ireland. And what we asked them is, and they solicited plays that are about 10 minutes, if that much, in length, 500 words, from the Irish people, because they wanted to create a work that showed the thinking or the feelings that were happening at that time in Ireland. And they got some 1,700 submissions. And from that, they chose 50 and created these plays. We are about to celebrate the 100th anniversary year of JFK, so we thought it would be great if we could partner with them to create the Tiny Plays of Ireland and America. So that's what we did. We solicited plays from all over, from different categories, different age groups, teachers, students, people in their 80s, people that weren't even alive when Kennedy was here, and asked them to make some comment through a play about John F. Kennedy and what it meant to him. So actually this play is running right now. It's on tonight, and it's called Tiny Plays for Ireland and America, and it's really quite interesting. Obviously, we weren't very good with the weather, because it has been raining for most of the time, but finally we have the sun out, and we've created for the first time a green space at the Kennedy Center where everybody can come and sit and drink and eat on the North Plaza. There are 500 artists that have come. There are 91 performances over the next 2 weeks. I have a couple of clips to show you. One is from Nordic Cool. But that's all I have. I didn't drill down to the granular, but maybe in the conversation next that we will be able to talk about some more specific things. But thank you for your attention.
Well, thanks ever so much, Alicia. That really helped to get a sense of what the Kennedy Center's been able to do. But could you just for the benefit of those of us who aren't familiar with the basis on which the Kennedy Center operates, could you talk about the role of U.S. government support in what you do? Because you mentioned how much you have, that you're involved in raising money, that you have a non-governmental status. But how has that relationship developed with the U.S. government?
We actually are a quasi-federal agency.
Right.
And the Kennedy Center gets a certain amount of money from the government, but only to support the memorial aspect of the operation. Anything that has to do with the maintenance, turning the lights on, that kind of thing. But everything else in terms of the operations of the Kennedy Center is money that we have to raise. So we are a 501c3 as well. We have to raise money from foundations, from corporations, from individuals and governments. Our annual budget is about $200 million for everything that we put on our stages, and that's what we have to raise funding for. So all of the programs. we do, because it is the national memorial to the late president, we do have a special relationship with the government in that our Board of Trustees is appointed by the President of the United States. There are many other advisory boards, and the NSO, National Symphony Orchestra, is an artistic affiliate, as the Washington National Opera is. So all of that is under the Kennedy Center umbrella.
And is there a firewall? Because we hear about the Smithsonian getting into trouble for putting forward artistic elements which somebody in Congress will take exception to. Does that ever happen for the Kennedy Center? Or have you got a get out of jail free card?
It has not happened for
Not happened so far.
for the Kennedy Center. The Smithsonian gets a lot more money from the federal government
Okay.
than the Kennedy Center does. So we raise money privately, and I think that's really important to keeping our autonomy in terms of making the selection, our artistic selections.
And what about the relationship specifically with the White House? Because there's every now and again there's a
The Kennedy Center Board of Trustees is appointed by
Right.
by the president. And that is basically the relationship with the White House. The president comes to the Kennedy Center Honors every year, which is the celebration of 5 artists usually that are that have achieved.
and for many people that'll be living outside of the Washington area. That's often the thing that gets the Kennedy Center on their map. News film of people being honored in that way.
Right. It has been a CBS production for the last 20-some years. So indeed, I mean, that is one way, and probably a major way, that most of the people in this country and maybe in the world know the Kennedy Center.
How have you seen? I mean, you're presenting these festivals in no particular, as you said, in no particular order. Have you seen an evolution in an approach to international culture? And is the tide coming in, going out? Does it ebb and flow? How does this map onto political currents from your perspective?
Right. I mean, I was showing them in no
Yeah.
particular order. But in terms of how we selected the festivals, they were well thought out in advance, because it takes many, many years
Of
to do the work. One of the things I do is to travel to these countries to do it. When I was working on Arabesque, the festival itself was in 2009, but I did the work between, say, 2005, 2006, and 2009 to make it happen. So it was at the height of, during the Bush administration, it was at the height of great discontent with the United States. But it was something I wanted to do. Michael Kaiser was then the president, he also wanted to do it. But we were always waiting for a better time in history, a better time meaning a time when the temperature was a little lower, that we were hoping that things would evolve quite differently. But it didn't seem that that was coming, so we decided we're going to do it come hell or high water, and that's what we did. But we could not do it today, since the spring, the Arab Spring.
Really?
No. I mean, we did 22 countries. These countries are all very divided. A lot of them are just in turmoil. You look at Syria, you look at Egypt.
So you feel you needed
Jordan.
the old regimes in order to have stable partners to work with.
I am
In
hopeful.
the art sense. I mean, this is.
I wouldn't phrase it in that
Right,
way.
sure.
I think that, and hope for the region, that they do get to a place in their own history
Right.
where they will have freedom, they will have democratic governments, and enjoy what some of the other countries in the world enjoy. But indeed, those figures were in place at that time.
How do you know when one of these festivals has really paid off? What are your indicators of success?
I guess by the audiences, certainly the number of people that come, the critical acclaim that is received. In future years, the tours that happen in the United States because these artists have been introduced, that even within the Kennedy Center, that we would bring back those artists or look for new artists from the region as we do. I'll give you an example. When we were doing the Nordic Festival, we were not able to bring the Royal Swedish Ballet with the work by Mats Ek, which I really wanted to bring. But we are bringing it in June 1st now, in this year, because we were able to work out the timing, and it was something that was still on my list of things to do. So those things to me indicate a certain amount of success in terms of the relationships that we have built, the ongoing work that we continue to do around the world with various countries and artists. So that's important.
And what do you feel is of these festivals? What do you feel has been most successful by these? What do you feel proudest of in all of this?
In all of this?
In all of this.
All of
Which is
them.
it's like asking. I'm sorry. It's like asking you to pick. Yeah, which is your favorite child?
Right,
But no, I can
right.
see. I get that feeling. I think that's very powerful. It's a very powerful thing to see.
I think the most challenging was Arabesque, the
Right.
22 countries of the Arab world.
Well, that's
That
the one that I think caused most of a stir for people who aren't cultural specialists focusing on this stuff. To think, my goodness, the United States is welcoming artists from the Arab world, giving them a stage, working with them in that way at this time. That was a wonderful spectacle of what the arts can do, what it can bring to international relations.
Right. I mean, and I do believe wholeheartedly that the arts are the best tool that we have to bring people together. And I think that people learned a lot during that festival about the Arab world. And particularly in terms of the political things, the environment that was going on, from the film and from the literature is where you got down to more of the granular. Rather than from the dance, or sometimes from the theater as well. But those elements were there, and I couldn't have created a festival without that. It had to be authentic. It had to, the artist's voice had to be very present.
How do you work with, as in some ways you're representing American culture as well, how do you work with commercial pressures and commercially successful American cultural output? How do you balance that in what you do?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
I mean, what I'm thinking about is that, as you make choices as to what you foreground, there is commercially successful American cultural output. The stuff that people like around the world, the stuff people make a fuss about, the stuff that can stand on its own legs. How do you make sure that it isn't the American commercial genres that dominate, and how do you draw the lines between, particularly thinking about audience tastes? You mentioned having to balance between the material that's suitable for your audience and material that the partner might wish to put forward. So I'm thinking here about, one of the problems in cultural diplomacy is between the culture that the cultural attaché wishes to celebrate and the culture that the international audience wants to consume. And how are you drawing those lines, and what particular kinds of things or what helps you put things on different sides of the lines? How have those? Could you talk us through some of those?
I do
decisions?
try to create the right marketing mix. I mean, we do
Right.
have to sell tickets. I don't think of what I present as being in the commercial realm. Maybe a Sarah Barras, flamenco dancer from Spain, who certainly in New York can fill City Center for a whole week. In Washington, we can't quite do that, but that she is here or that she's part of the program is very, very important. She's not one of the government artists, not funded by the government at all. So that's one example. But I'll give you another example. When I was doing, I did do Americartes, which was a festival celebrating the arts and culture of Latin America. And there's a group called Los Tigres del Norte. And they had a reputation for narco ballads. They were sort of bad boys. But they were trying to change their image in the world. And they had a certain appeal, certain audiences that they appealed to. And so they came to us because they knew we were doing this festival. We were focusing on Mexico at the time. And they said, we want to be a part of your festival. Very commercial group. They had sold out at the convention center here and in New York and everywhere. So we knew they had an audience. They also had a private plane, so they could fly themselves into Washington. They had some leftover dollars. They could sort of pay their way. But what they wanted from us was the platform and the ability to show that they had righted themselves, so to say, and not talking about the drug scene and not just talking about it, but advocating for it. So we talked and talked. I have to say, I know there's some people here from the Mexican embassy. The Mexican embassy at that time was not so interested in me doing that because of the reputation, but I knew that this group would reach a very different demographic. And so we decided to do it. And it was just an extraordinary evening. We had little to no cost because of, what they were able to provide us with. And the audience were laborers. And so Michael Kaiser was the president at the time, and he was threatening to cancel the whole thing because by the day before the actual performance, we were at 13% of capacity, which didn't look good. But we heard through our Latino workers at the Kennedy Center and through others that on the Latino radio stations that it was buzzy. People were calling in and asking, where is the Kennedy Center? Because they wanted to come. And so then we figured out that maybe they didn't have credit cards. And so what we did on that day was that all of the, at the box office, all of the box office agents had cash to be able to give change. And they came, and they came, and they came. And ultimately, we sold out. But they didn't have credit cards, and they came in there. If they were painters, they had on painting outfit, house painters, farmers or whatever.
And something just happened in movies.
No, and they came with their kids. It was noisy, and this was before you took selfies, but they were taking selfies. They would run up to the stage and take a selfie with the group. But it was great, and I was just so pleased that we could bring that audience into the Kennedy Center.
Michael Kaiser nearly cancelled because of low.
Right, because if you got 13%, and this is in the concert hall, so.
The final part that I wanted you to talk through is the process of how you. When I'm thinking about how to build partnerships, the step that seems to be essential is agreeing a shared vision. And I wonder if you could talk us through the process of agreeing a shared vision, especially maybe for Arabesque or because with the Nordics you talked about the vision coming from the cultural diplomats in the first place. But how do you agree how do you come to a process of what is the process for reaching a vision that can bring everybody to the table around an issue?
I mean, there are lots of discussions. And I'll just use China again as an example. Their vision for the arts that should come was very different than mine, because what they were proposing were not the kind of artists necessarily. They were more commercial.
Right.
It was more Disney-like, if you will, and it's just not the kind of work that we do. And I had to. I mean, that's why I went so many times to sit with them and to say, this. If you want this to be about the new China, then we cannot do the work that you are proposing. We have to go down this road.
Right.
There can be a little of that, but really it can't be the brunt of it. And what finally convinced them was when I said, the media is not going to be kind to presenting this kind of work. This is not innovative, it's not authentic, it's not what is going on in terms of the Chinese artistic community. And so then it stopped, and I was able to move forward. But it's sort of talking it through. It takes a lot of time, but both partners have to be willing to give and take a bit. Like with the Indians.
Case.
Yes,
That's a fascinating case. But this all seems to show that with partnerships, energy spent up front at the early stages, getting the terms of the partnership, expectations clear, pays off down the line.
Absolutely, and going to the countries, understanding the context for the work, meeting the people, understanding their response to certain work. It may be great work, but I may not like it. But if I see that it's important for that country,
Right.
Or for these artists, then I will probably include it. But mostly I rely on my own intuition and vision for it to do that with input. I
Thanks.
study it.
Thanks. Well, thanks
Okay.
for those thoughts, and thanks for what you've done. But let's now open it up for questions. Yes, there's a number of questions. But first hand was that lady there. Yes, please. Have we got an extra microphone? I think we're being streamed, so it would be good if somebody could take the microphone up.
Excuse me.
Is that all right? Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Don't fall.
I don't really want to be live streamed here or
Thank you. I applaud the 24 years of your professional accomplishment. Regarding Asia, you had tried very hard to project the cultures of China and India. My question to you is, have you visited Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, in the light of Obama trip? So the question is Asia basically East Asia and Central Asia? What happened to Southeast Asia?
Southeast Asia, I just
And that's the
I haven't
richest
gotten.
cultural center in the world, Indonesia.
Undoubtedly. I have not gotten there. That's Southeast Asia and the Kazakhstans, all of the stands are the two areas of the world where I have not explored. But certainly, actually, Vietnam, we did some mini events with around Vietnam celebrating the anniversaries of our restoring relations and other anniversaries. So I have worked with artists from Southeast Asia, from Vietnam, from Cambodia. I just haven't been there and put together an entire festival.
There's a lady on the corner. Sarah, could you bring the microphone down? And then we're working around to the man on this end.
Thank you all both. As a native Washingtonian, I'm really happy that this is happening here. But Ms. Adams, and thank you so much for your work with the Kennedy Center. It's gotten closer to the local community.
Right.
And what you said about Los Tigres del Norte and the audience that they brought out, that's very important to have the grassroots, ordinary people come also. But you mentioned DNA several times in your presentation.
Once.
Well, I think you mentioned it twice. So it happens that there's a professor, Alondra Nelson in New York, who has a new book out called The Social Life of DNA, Race, Reparations, and Reconciliation After the Genome, and exactly some of the things that you were talking about. So I'm wondering about the cultural expression, because we talk about some sides of this, you talk about this mix, but those of us who've sort of been hit upside the head with the mix, and also our side of the story, our perspectives. I'm really interested in how that's going to be interpreted culturally. Thank you.
Well, I mean, it's something that's the cross-cultural connections, integration, who we are, in our DNA or whatever. It's something that's very interesting to me. And at this point, I've traveled to over 65 countries. So I've been able to track around the world. I can look at people and get some idea of what, who they are, what they are, and I will generally ask to see if my notion is so. So when I did Iberia, it was a great opportunity for me to focus on that, because you can see from Spain and Portugal exactly where they went, and look at those cultures in the world and see what it has given rise to. So that is one way. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but that is one of the things I did to show those connections. So.
It's a different view when you go to Loíza, Aldea, in Puerto Rico.
Well, I've been to Puerto Rico too, and to those parts, and that's a story I will tell you separately.
Offline.
Nick, if we go to this gentleman and then this lady next. If you just speak into that part, it's going to work.
Fantastic. To pick up on a couple of Nick's comments, I have, as to complaints from Congress, I have rarely recognized a member of Congress in an audience at the Kennedy Center for music, dance, or what have you. And as to the commercial enterprises, it's a totally different department of the Kennedy Center that's bringing us Kinky Boots and eventually Hamilton. But in terms of the quest for audience, particularly younger audience, a typical audience at the Kennedy Center is approximately 2.5 times the average age of the people here. And I'm wondering whether your festivals fit into the quest for a younger audience at all. And also, if you wanted to comment on the fact that U.S. government cultural outreach you spoke of only in the past tense.
Indeed, the festivals do address the age difference. I mean, if you come to one of the festivals, you will see that there's a huge diversity, including age, ethnicity, and also it's a very different demographic than there is for, say, the symphony, the opera, and for some of the other programs. Certainly something like Hamilton, if they can buy a ticket, will, bring that audience down. Last year we did, as a mini festival. It was called Finding a Line, which was about skateboarding. And so that brought in a whole new audience to the Kennedy Center. It was combined with jazz. And so we are doing a lot of things. The Millennium Stage offers opportunities. Other things that we're doing through the cultural engagement sector of the Kennedy Center certainly, bring that in, bring in different demographic as well. It's important. It's important to the new president, Deborah Rutter, that we do expand our reach and our audience. In terms of of government reach, I think it's changed a lot. I think because of the economics. When I used to travel, USIA went away, very soon after I began to work on these festivals. But still within the embassies, there was always the cultural attaché and the foreign national, who had extraordinary knowledge of the country and of the artist, and it was an extraordinary opportunity to be able to work with them and to find the way. But now that position is pretty much eliminated. There's a public affairs officer who doesn't necessarily know what's going on in the arts and cultural world, nor do they have the time for it. When I was working on China, there was no cultural affairs person there, and the staff was relatively new. So my work tended to be work, meaning being able to be guided or connected, was with the ministry, the Chinese Ministry of Culture. But heretofore, it had always been with the American side. So it has changed dramatically, I would say.
Actually, we probably you were next.
Hi, my name is Anna Danielson, and I just wanted to thank you for your work at the Kennedy Center and for sharing your experiences and your wisdom today. My question has to do with the partnerships that's part of the theme today. I think that part of the contribution that places like the Kennedy Center can make is building partnerships with peer institutions in other countries. So, for example, with Arabesque and other situations that have become fragile, how does the Kennedy Center maintain those relationships with institutions, not necessarily the governments, but the institutions in some of the different regions where you've worked with them, maintaining those relationships through the future?
Institutions meaning organizations or
Artistic institutions.
artistic
Yeah.
institutions. generally, we stay connected. One of the things that had happened, again, under Michael's leadership was that there was an arts management program that he had created. So there were many young fellows that came to the Kennedy Center to participate in that, and then went back home and worked for whatever organization they worked for. There were many ways in which we still had those connections. In my email box every day, there's always something from many parts of the world from the various organizations. So it's something that I managed to keep up, and then institutionally, if it can be spread, I mean, that's something that I do as well. But it's very important to me that we don't just do these one-offs, but that we do have and build long-term relationships. Somebody like Arif Sweif, who is an Egyptian writer that I met for African Odyssey, is somebody that I have stayed connected with. She's participated in many of the festivals in other ways while I'm here, that I have done. So it's there because they're relationships. So they're people, and we talk. Some are good friends.
I think that's. Sorry, could I just? That's the time that we have for questions. We're now going to move to a coffee break.
Quick coffee break.
Before we
That's
move
okay.
on with the rest of the program.
Yes.
But can we please thank Alicia for a fantastic presentation.
Everybody, welcome back, and thank you all for staying. Sometimes people leave, so I'm really great to see everybody still here and still engaged in the conversation. My name is Sarah Frankland. I serve as the Cultural Advisor to the Scottish Government Office here in Washington, D.C., and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the second part of the conversation, where we'll be having 4 case studies. The last 3 are from very different countries with different experiences, and hopefully will help us frame the work that's actually being done in cultural diplomacy and in partnership and collaborative working here in the United States. But first, it's my pleasure to again welcome Professor Nick Hull, who is the director of the Master of Public Diplomacy program at USC. Nick has given up a lot of his time to be here with us. He's actually on the way to Paris later today, and we're very grateful for that, and also very grateful, clearly, for bringing some of the sunshine from California, which we definitely needed. Anyway, thank you all very much, and over to Nick.
Thank you. So, thank you. I want to spend a little time contextualizing this theme of partnership in cultural diplomacy. I want to relate the theme to cultural diplomacy as a whole, to look at some of the forces in play in cultural diplomacy, and then to get into this question of why collaborate. We're going to be looking at some cases that include partnership, but I want to wind up by trying to establish a sort of a matrix for rules for partnership and 10 secrets of a happy collaboration, some of which, and these are drawn from case studies, a wider body of case studies of partnership in cultural diplomacy, and some of them I think will surprise you. First of all, this is where I see cultural diplomacy as fitting within public diplomacy as a whole. This figure was developed by the Canadian government about 10 years ago now. And what I like about it is it shows that we must think of cultural diplomacy and the more exchange-based cultural relations as taking place in the longer term, medium to long term, and with a medium level of government control ranging through to a pretty well unmediated government presence where the government is merely issuing the visas, turning people loose and letting them get on with the business of creation. Important forces in play in the cultural sphere. Well, Alicia already mentioned what Joseph Nye has called soft power, and it's often in the realm of culture that the most attractive features of places and nations are on display. We have the cultural field, including the sporting field, as an area of uncontroversial activity where nations which couldn't meet informal diplomatic settings can still engage with one another. And the ping-pong diplomacy with China is probably the most famous case of that. We have a field where we can do things that are of mutual benefit. We can enjoy a shared collaborative cultural experience and experience the power that flows from shared enjoyment of something. There is great power in education. One of the few things that everybody understands in the world is the benefit of education. There's been a UN poll asking audiences around the world, what do you most value? What should be a priority? And the only thing we can agree on is that everybody should care about education. Exchange is an inherent part of human interaction. There is a great anthropological history of gifts and gift exchanging, and culture is one way of bringing that process of exchanging into our contemporary realm. And finally, we get into the realm of human vulnerabilities, our political Achilles heels, if you like. We are all susceptible to one another's cultures. This is a way in which we can make ourselves vulnerable to each other. I see 4 key approaches to cultural diplomacy, and I've arranged these in order of what I perceive as their value. The fundamental way in which cultural diplomacy has happened, the traditional way, is that of the cultural gift, where countries pick out the best thing they see as doing, and they then make that available overseas. So they're sharing the best of their country to increase that country's prestige. An example from a Chinese perspective would be sending a Beijing opera like the Peony Pavilion to an international audience. But I think that can only be the beginning. Beyond that, we can use cultural diplomacy as a way of sharing cultural information, taking an unknown dimension of our culture and making that available to a foreign audience in order to correct an image. So the things that China did through the Kennedy Center to showcase not the central imperial culture, but the little regional cultures, the smaller folk cultures within China, the diversity of China, that was new to audiences and is part of a process of extending cultural knowledge. The third approach is to work through culture to build capacity, teaching cultural skills that can promote understanding or development. The most obvious way this is done is through work to teach foreign audiences your language. But there are other ways in which this has worked too. I think that work to develop the skills of writers or dramatists or choreographers in a foreign country is a way in which culture is used to be relevant to a foreign audience. And the fourth approach is a dialogue or exchange based around culture, where partners work cooperating in the cultural field to develop mutual knowledge of one another and to have the experience of doing something together. An example of this in the field of Chinese cultural diplomacy would be a project between China and India called West Heavens, where philosophers from China and India meet on a regular basis to discuss the interdependence of their philosophical systems. Why do we need to collaborate? Well, the first reason we need to collaborate is we're in a world where the problems are bigger than any one country. As the UN Deputy Secretary General Shashi Tharoor put it about 10 years ago, problems are now without passports, and so solutions have to be without passports too. We need to cross borders to deal with problems like human rights, terrorism, climate change. The list goes on. Secondly, we all have limited resources. I don't know if this is a cultural form that is the one-man band that is part of your culture as it is the culture of Scotland and the rest of the British Isles, but cultural officers today often feel like this kind of performer where they're having to do all the instruments themselves. They haven't got the resources to mount a cultural display or conversation or dialogue unilaterally. They need to bring partners in to have any impact on an international conversation. Also, individuals, also individuals have a limited credibility. Increasingly, through social media, we're able to get information from people who are exactly like ourselves. We live in a world which is subdividing into little digital bubbles, and collaboration is necessary to break into those digital bubbles. Maybe you can find somebody inside a different bubble from yourself, and by working with them, you can break into that person's audience sphere too. We have an opportunity to connect around shared goals, to maximize our resources, and this is why we're now talking in the field of diplomatic studies about not just cultural diplomacy, but a new cultural diplomacy, a collaborative cultural diplomacy. And an example of this would be the rapid evolution now of the European Union National Institutes of Culture. It used to be that European Union countries kind of were involved in a cultural Olympics, where if somebody started learning Spanish, it was a major defeat for the Italians, and so forth. That mentality is beginning to fall away as European countries are seeing that there is a win-win out there, and that maybe a Dane can do a good job of explaining British or German values, and might even do a better job in some places. That what's really important, we share, and collaboration can maximize resources and get new ideas on the table. But one of the questions, therefore, is how do you collaborate? It's one thing to say what you need to do is collaborate. It's another thing to actually get collaboration on the road. Now, there is a literature of collaboration, and the work that I found particularly useful is a work by maybe an unusual voice in a cultural diplomacy setting, William Bratton, who was the police chief in Los Angeles when I first lived in the city, and he worked with a Harvard business expert, Zachary Tumin, to create a book called Collaborate or Perish, which is a sort of a how-to manual of collaboration. And he has sort of 10 basic steps, which I'll run through for you, and I think these will be recognizable to the diplomats on the stage with me. The first stage is you have to begin with a vision. What do you want to do? And this has to be very clear and communicable. Then you have to know the problem you wish to address. So this is the listening phase, where in Alicia's case, she had to travel to the places she wanted to work with and really come to know the players in those places and understand what their concerns were. The third phase, Bratton called right-sizing the problem. And that's about accepting that you cannot do everything in a single collaboration, but what you can do if you identify a small aspect of where you want to work, you can focus on that and get a small thing done to great effect. The fourth thing is that you build your platform. In the sense of the Kennedy Center, it's the institution that supports the idea of international arts festivals. And once that platform is in place, it doesn't have to be reinvented for each new collaboration. You can have institutional continuity, and Alicia is a great example of how the wheel doesn't have to be reinvented each time there is a new collaboration. The fifth phase, locating partners. This comes out of the nature of the particular issue you're trying to work with. In the case of Kennedy Center collaborations, it's often working with businesses that have a connection to that particular culture agenda. I think you've worked with airlines it's important to sell a win-win, to explain to all the collaborators what they're getting from the collaboration, and that the collaboration is for a mutual benefit, to frame the story, to present it in a way that is attractive and dynamic, and also to remember the political realities, to think about the consequences of what you're doing and the limits on your partners, that they have their own concerns, they have their limits too. And the ninth quality that they suggested is accepting the limits of the partnership. And when you look at where partnerships go wrong, quite often it is because one of the partners has a misunderstanding of what's going to happen with the partnership. I find that when somebody partners with my university, they rather think that there is an unlimited supply of money, and they come in with an over-enthusiastic idea of what will be financially possible. So getting these limits clear at the beginning is an important step. I have a couple of cases of collaboration, and I'll talk you through the second one. This was a collaboration involving the US government. It is a soap opera called Sugar that was developed in Kenya a few years ago. It began with a vision that was using a cultural form to fight against HIV/AIDS in Africa. Knowing the problem in this case meant researching the medical dynamics, the economic and the social dynamics of HIV/AIDS in Africa, and thinking about the way in which that was a problem in the widest sense for Africa. Right-sizing it meant focusing particularly on youth and women as being a smaller audience within the entirety of the problem in Africa. And then once you decide you're focusing on youth and women, you think, well, what cultural forms might reach youth and women? The platform the US government had for this work was PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. The partners were unusual. They included the Norwegian government, UNICEF, and MTV. And when it was decided that the best way to communicate around HIV/AIDS was to work through a soap opera, that is a cultural form that would be readily accessible to African youth and women, that made a lot of sense. The win-win in this situation was allowing the corporate partners to claim their participation in terms of corporate social responsibility. So to be able to say, well, we're not going to just say this is all for charity. It also has to be for the commercial benefit of MTV or other things that PEPFAR's done. Coca-Cola has to be able to see, Coca-Cola cares, therefore you should drink more Coca-Cola. The frame of the story was that it was a joint initiative with an artistic dimension. The political realities were that they needed to brace for moral criticism within the US and Kenya, because if you're going to make a TV show that is culturally respectable and deals with HIV/AIDS, it's going to have to include frank discussion of sexual relationships. And that's not something that Congress likes spending money on, and it's not something that people in Kenya are particularly comfortable with, but they went ahead with it and accepted the limits of the partnership. Well, the partners had to accept one another's agendas, but the show was so successful that it lived on. It now is based not in Kenya, but in Nigeria. And the star of the show, Lupita Nyong'o, this was her breakthrough project, and she's now an amazing representative of Africa in global media. But the good news is, I think that this program did have an impact on HIV/AIDS. Looking at multiple partnerships, the 10 secrets seem to be, number one, to agree shared objectives at the beginning, to put energy into a process of thinking about the partnership, including the management of expectations, so that people are clear. This is a project-based partnership. This is not a commitment to bankrolling activity ad infinitum, and keeping aspirations in check. Establishing trust, and numerous people that I've spoke to have said this has to be done through face-to-face meetings. It's tempting to work through emails and Skype conversations, but everybody I'm talking to says you have to meet face-to-face. And you have to protect that trust, and continuing to relate to one another directly seems to be the way to do that. It's important in a partnership to insist on equality, not based on the dollar value of the contribution, but that all partners should be honored equally, and partnership contributions in kind be given respect. That we should, within partnerships, allow and respect the emergence of specialization and celebrate the ways in which partnerships cross boundaries, cross sectors, cross geographical borders, and generational frontiers. And that somehow having these differences within a partnership is one of the things that makes this kind of work in the cultural or the political sphere fun and rewarding and even renewing. This means it's also really important to share the credit. And sometimes this is where the partnership goes off the rails, because after a successful partnership, one player will, or even one person representing a particular player, I can think of numerous deans who do this all the time, will claim responsibility at the end of the day for the entirety of everything that everybody has put together. And this is so much bad feeling comes from this. And the final lesson is that it's a good idea to part before it gets old. By focusing a partnership on a particular project, by getting a good participation around a particular thing, you can move the ball forward, but you don't have to stay with it. It's okay to move on. The Kennedy Center can retain elements of its China Festival, but it doesn't have to remain wedded to China indefinitely. The image on the screen is a cook stove, which was developed by Philips in the Netherlands. It burns cleanly, so USAID made this available through international partnership with to populations in India and China. So this is a partnership in a development sense that was able to cross borders that are very, very much contested in the world, and shows that if the vision's right, if the groundwork is done, amazing things can come about through partnership. My conclusion is that I feel strongly cultural diplomacy can't just be about self-promotion anymore. But the foundational need for these partnerships to move forward is that we find a vision that can be shared. And the vision cannot just be about avoiding a negative. Right now, when governments talk, I hear a lot, we all hear a lot about the things they don't like. They don't like people joining ISIS. They don't like people lining up behind crazy strongmen. They don't like the crazy strongmen in Russia. They don't like the crazy strongmen in so many other countries, even though people here seem to be lining up behind a crazy strongman too. We can't just be about avoiding a negative. What we need to do is to find a way to generate a vision of a future, of a shared future. And the cultural sector seems to be the missing dimension. This is where we have an opportunity to develop a sense of a shared and an inclusive future that through a cultural vision can be made available to an international audience. If you look back at the moments of crisis that have affected our people, our civilizations in the past, at the moment of crisis, we turned the corner when we were able to develop a vision about the future. World War I changed when Woodrow Wilson introduced his vision of what the peace could be through the League of Nations. World War II turned around when an Atlantic Charter was signed and the UN vision came into being, and people began thinking about how it couldn't just be about defeating a worse world, but about embracing and building a new world. And right now we have an acute lack of vision. The image on the screen comes from the movie about the high-wire walker walking between the Twin Towers. I don't know much about high-wire walking, but one thing this movie makes clear is that if you're going to be on the high wire and you're going to not fall off, you have to keep your eye on the end of the wire. If you don't, you start to wobble around. Now, a vision of the future is the end of the wire. And right now, we have no collective vision, and boy, are we wobbling around. So I hope that through thinking about a process of collaboration, by thinking about a need for a future that can be an alternative to the negatives that are part of our lives right now. We can have at least a conversation that can begin to move us forward to a more, to a better shared future and a better shared world. Thank you for your attention. Linda.
Thank you so much. I'm Linda Zachrisson, Cultural Counselor at the Embassy of Sweden here in US since a year back. I want to thank you for inviting me here today. I'm very honored to be here with all of you, and to thank Alicia and Nick also for your talks. And I want to comment on Kennedy Center actually when starting, also because I really want to echo what Alicia said, that the Nordic Cool project became a model for the Nordic countries to work together, and we are still doing that in a very strong way. And the festival in 2017 will actually be at the South Bank Centre in London, will be a 12-month-long festival. And here in Washington, we are now working together with an arts exhibition in collaboration with the Phillips Collection. And we are, all the Nordic ambassadors will walk together in the Pride Parade on the 11th of June. And lots of other things happening. So thank you for that. And also, I want to echo Alicia in asking you all to come to the Kennedy Center and see the Royal Swedish Ballet and Mats Ek's piece, Juliet and Romeo, that will be there next week. It's an amazing piece, and I dare to say that the company right now is one of the strongest in the world. And talking about, mutual benefits of things, I also want to invite you to the House of Sweden, because right now, because of the visit of the Royal Swedish family, no, but the ballet, fortunate, we have an exhibition, a photo exhibition at the House of Sweden on Mats Ek's 40 years of choreography. I took some cards, they are out there. It's open every weekend. It's from this Canadian amazing photographer, Leslie Spanks, and it's on all summer. Yes. Now, let's see. Is this? No. Yeah, here. Here's my house. Here's the House of Sweden, where I'm working. It's 5 minutes walk from the Kennedy Center, actually, right by the Potomac. And it's where the embassy is, but it's also a public space, which is very important to us. We are celebrating a 10-year anniversary of the building this fall. And during these 10 years, we've actually had 600,000 people coming to our programs and seminars, concerts, and exhibitions. And we're open every weekend for the public and doing lots of events. We have built, that was one of the first initiatives I took coming here, built a room for children downstairs, which is packed with children's literature, and every weekend we have arts and crafts workshops and reading of Pippi Longstocking and other things. Right now it's Mats Ek's exhibition and one on gender equality. For many years, 20 actually, I've been working with the arts itself in different functions. And I spent most of my time in the performing arts, but also in film and cultural policies as political advisor for the former Minister of Culture and Education in Sweden 10 years ago. I also worked with contemporary circus and for a few years. This is a picture, and let's see if I make this now, a video from a company called Cirkus Cirkör that I used to be the dramaturg and the producer and then the CEO for a couple of years for. They took me to the US and they got me bitten by the circus bug, because my first coming here was actually as casting director for this company when we were supposed to do a big project in Las Vegas with this Swedish video director, Jonas Åkerlund. in 1999. He's hot again because he did this Lemonade video with Beyoncé. But when we went to Vegas, we were a team of 18 Swedes with a too big budget from one of the hotels in there, Rio, and we all got megalomania and put forward a pre-production suggestion that actually gave the hotel director very cold feet. So we never did a Vegas show, but and during those years it was like a hard clash with the core of American entertainment industry. Coming from my background was working with audience development in the Municipal Theatre of Stockholm, the House of Culture. I felt very, very Swedish during those months in Vegas. I'm trying now to put this on. Let's see. So you just get a hang of it. Do you know what contemporary circus is? Yeah. So it's no animals. It used the traditional circus technique, but it works through music, live music, and theatrical elements and so on. Now, why I wanted to show you this is because I think, just as Nick pointed out, that you talked about the conflict between, I will just let this run and you can see this. The piece is called Knitting Peace, and actually the set design is almost all knitted, actually from one of the artists who is a committed knitter. She keeps knitting during the tours. And when they are touring, they also invite local knitters to come. So they were just performing in Philadelphia at PIFA Festival the other week. And knitters from Philadelphia had contributed, so the whole lobby was filled with knitted things. And they were asked to knit on the question, can you knit peace? And it made many answers. But one of the projects I'm working with here now is drawing attention to Swedish and Nordic contemporary circus. And why I'm doing that is because when I've listened, which I think is core point to how I work, my method, there is a great curiosity and demand for contemporary circus in the US, and not so many kinds of infrastructure and not so much knowledge. There is a lot in Canada, but not in the US. And Nick, you mentioned the conflict between what an attaché wants to send out and what the international audiences are interested in. And contemporary circus is one of the answers I've gotten when I've listened. So when Circur was in Philadelphia, we invited, that's also how we worked through matchmaking and networking. We invited programmers from all over the US to come to Philadelphia, not to having to fly all the way to Sweden, but to come to Philadelphia to meet with them. And then we also asked 2 of the artists to stay for a few weeks and do workshops here. So we did workshops for professional circus artists at the Kennedy Center, actually, and also working with kids and also children with autism. This is one of the teachers that stayed, the turning guy. So now I'm trying to find my way back here. Great, thank you. Cheers to Mike. This is also a picture from one of the workshops, because we also work with elders, as you can see. And to work with contemporary circus is such a great pedagogical tool without language borders, and really good for communities to try. When I worked at the circus, we also had office circus training sometimes. So I know a bit about tight wire walking, actually. In my former positions in the arts, when I was producing and curating, I sometimes met with people in the functions that I have right now. And I think that actually I think that the cultural counselors and their colleagues are focusing too much on the size of their budgets, or if they have houses or not. And instead of looking out and finding out who's out there and where's the energy and where's the curiosity and who could I talk to and what can we do together? I must say it's a great pleasure to work in the US because there is such a knowledge in working collaboratively, and there's always, I think, because everyone needs to be open for development. I mean, also from the point of fundraising, everyone are very open. And I think also that maybe I still haven't learned to filter the American enthusiasm. So, you know, I'm starting to use the word amazing more and more often. And wonderful. But, you know, so many meetings end up with a handshake and, you know, yes, let's work together. I love it. So we have a lot of projects coming out on that. But what I wanted to mention that when I was working in Stockholm with international programming and international venue, for example, many times it was the smaller countries that had the greatest impact on me because they found out about who I was and how my programming looked like. And the big dogs could work by themselves, like the Goethe Institute. They have their place, they have their money. They could just present that grand project. But sometimes it was like the Czech Republic, the Polish people, or Romanians that invited me and dared to be specific in what they were suggesting, not saying that everything from Poland is exquisite, but maybe you would be interested in these and these or that, and maybe we could, if you are, please let us help you in making this happen. So I took that with me, and that's how I'm trying to work. And I'm not sent out by the foreign ministry. I'm kind of a fake diplomat, I feel like sometimes, because I had 1 week of classes at the foreign ministry, and the lesson, the only lesson almost that I remember is when they talked about, they confirmed the picture of Mata Hari and the John le Carré novels, that many times the cultural counselors are the spies. No one can really say if they are just making everything up or not. But I'm sent out from the Ministry of Culture and Democracy in Sweden, and I have 8 colleagues, also recruited because of their artistic backgrounds. And it's great. I also find it very inspiring that we have the word democracy in our ministry now, and the minister I work for also works with human rights and LGBT rights and also racism and things like that. So I'm trying to use the concept of democracy, even if I don't have to, but as an inspiration in my daily work, also as a method in planning of who to meet and to talk to, who to partner with, how to make the decisions, and how we are promoting and marketing, targeting audiences, and so on. And not the least, who do we put on stage, and who do we represent? And yeah, here it is. This is a picture of me meeting with Gina Davis. Do you remember Thelma and Louise? Yeah. I went to see her one of the first months I came here because I wanted, now I don't know if you know that, but she works full-time with something called Gina Davis Institute on Gender in Media, and she fundraises to get research on how images of men and women are totally different in film and media, and the role models it twists in a bad way. And she's chasing the big guys in Hollywood to think about this. And I wanted to tell her that Sweden actually is the first and only country in the world that has reached a 50-50 distribution of funding for men and women in the film industry. And I wanted her to tell that story. Yeah. It's been a process, of course. When 11 years ago, I was political advisor of the former Minister of Culture, and we got a clause to work for this into the film agreement, which is an agreement between the government and the business side of the film industry in Sweden. And there's been three female CEOs at the Swedish Film Institute, where I also worked for a couple of years, that has been struggling with this question. And also from the cinema theaters in Sweden, this has been a work that they really driven. And Anna Särner is the CEO now at the Swedish Film Institute, and she is talking about this in a wonderful way. We just did a tour, actually, in partnership with universities in the US, where she was giving lectures on how Sweden achieved this. And there, to our joy, Gina Davis was tweeting about it. So now she's working for us. And we're working a lot on values like this as part of. I mean, I'm not having a program together with Gina Davis or others, but I want others to tell our story. And we also have the first government in the world that calls themselves feminist and feminist foreign policy. So as I mentioned, we also have an exhibition on gender equality at the House of Sweden. And when we opened that, we handed out a giveaway that was a bit untraditional. It was this book, Everyone Should Be a Feminist. And the reason we did that was because recently the women's lobby in Sweden handed this book to every 16-year-old, every boy, every girl in the whole country. And we wanted some Americans to read it too. It's a great TED Talk too, if you don't want to read the book. Yeah, this is also, you talked about updating the image of where a country is at, and coming up in a few weeks is a Swedish director called Josette Bushell Mingo that I proposed as a speaker for the TCG conference that will be in Washington in the end of June. It's a theater communications group that are bringing together, I think, 400 or 500 theaters from all over the US to discuss what they are working with. And recently in Sweden, there was the first production ever with a whole cast of Afro-Swedes making A Raisin in the Sun. And it's touring the whole country, and it's getting huge attention. And yeah, so now they are coming here to talk about that. This is, if I get one more minute, before coming here, I was artistic director at something called Parkteatern in Sweden, which was founded in '42, and that really modeled me, I must say, in so many ways, because I worked there for 6 seasons and met with over 1 million people. And it's a summer festival that goes on for 3 months for free, and that presents performing arts from all kinds and shapes. The Royal Ballet comes there every August, because all the month of August we're presenting contemporary dance in a park for 5,000 people. But we're also touring the whole city and literally going to people's backyards almost and presenting children's theater and so. And many times we meet with people who has never experienced performing arts before. And so my first initiative in coming here was actually to get out of that beautiful glass house that we're in, because there are so many people here that doesn't know that the glass house is where it is and that they can go there and it's for them. And we created a project called Sweden in the Park, where we focused on presenting children's theater and collaborated with Parkteatern's little sister in New York, Summer Stage. So we performed in Harlem and on Staten Island, and here in Washington at DuPont Circle with the Swedish Dance and Contemporary Circus for Kids. And we met with more than 10,000 people last summer. Yes. I was only wanted to conclude with, actually, if I can, a quote. My second day at work here, I took a walk to the Kennedy Center, if I can close with that again, and discovered some words at the wall in the lobby that I thought that I have to carry this with me. This is a beautiful quote from JFK from '62. It says, "The life of the arts, far from being an interruption, a distraction in the life of a nation, is very close to the center of a nation's purpose and is a test of a nation's civilization." Isn't that good? Yeah. Thank you so much.
I think I'm going to lower. Well, hello. Good morning to all of you. It's really a pleasure for me and an honor to be part of this fantastic, group. I want, of course, to thank the Scottish Affairs Office here in DC, and especially, Kate and Sarah, who thought about Peru to become an example that we could share today with you. Well, Nick has already given us, I think, a fantastic, overview of what public diplomacy is. And what I want to do in this sort of brief presentation about Peru is just for you to have an idea of how we have been working on this area and how we are trying, of course, to overcome some of the challenges that have already been talked about here. We've already, talked about how demanding and competitive is the cultural landscape here in DC. And we've already, mentioned that, public diplomacy wants to influence not just, of course, government entities, but mainly public opinion abroad and work with civil society. And how a country like Peru is doing that. We are here at the embassy focusing on three main areas, which are cultural diplomacy, and I think, so yes. So again, as I was, trying to explain to you, how a country like Peru is doing, to shape and put Peru in the minds and the civil society here in the US. So we've been focusing, start telling you, on these three areas, and I don't think, is that right? Is it? No, it doesn't work. Oh dear. Is it? Okay, how do we do it? Am I doing it the right way? I hope so. Yes, okay, great. So these are the main areas we are working on. Cultural diplomacy, gastro-diplomacy, and digital diplomacy. These are our main areas. Of course, it's not, there are other many different activities that we carry out and that also influence public opinion, but these are the areas that we've been focusing on in the last years. So we'll start with the first one, cultural diplomacy. And as you probably know, hopefully you've been to Peru, some of you, and as Nick mentioned in his presentation, culture is really a gift, for us. I mean, we have such a richness, such a vast and wonderful history, and probably what you know most is, our archaeology, our ruins and Machu Picchu. Probably you've heard, and you've probably known that just recently, some days ago, Machu Picchu was awarded the best landscape in the world, and I'm very happy to say we feel very proud for this distinction because, for instance, Taj Mahal in India is ranking 5th, and that's a wonderful site to visit as well, but again we are really very honored that the TripAdvisor is people has chosen Peru and Machu Picchu as the world's best landmark to visit. I wanted then on this aspect to talk to you a bit about our initiatives in this area. We've been, and again, quoting Nick and also Linda, we are partnering, yes. And we've realized that that is the best and probably the only way that a country like Peru, with sort of limited resources, can take advantage of and be at least heard, in this competitive cultural environment. So what we are doing, and we've been doing, is partnering with prestigious local institutions here in Washington. And for instance, this is an exhibit that we worked with National Geographic Society, Eternal Gold Treasures from Ancient Peru, which had, and we've also, for instance, had last year, probably our biggest event so far in the US. We were part of the Folklife Festival. It was called Peru Pachamama. We worked closely, of course, we organized this with the Smithsonian Institution, and being Alicia here, I also have to recognize the wonderful and valuable assistance that the Kennedy Center provided us with some activities within this, great festival. We've also been partnering with, this is also with the American Indian Museum within the National, within the Smithsonian Institution. And we've also been working, for already 6 years, as part of Passport DC Day, which I think probably all of you have heard of. And I know there is a small video here, which I've no idea how to, and I guess that's where it is. So we can maybe just, let's see if I can do this correctly. Is it okay? Okay. So anyway, we do it at the front, of the embassy, and of course we portray Peruvian dancers and of course Peruvian cuisine, which we will talk about, just following after this. And we get more or less 6,000, visitors, and we are very happy about the turnout. We've also partnered with prestigious academic institutions because, of course, we also want to work with that. And for instance, we've partnered this year with the Advanced School of International Studies, from Johns Hopkins University, and we've organized some talks about contemporary, topics of interest. We were China, Latin America, for instance, or the White House and how, Congress, how they conduct, so that was also a very, I think, interesting way of partnering with a prestigious institution and talking about Peru and other, topics of interest. We've also, of course, we've been trying to, we have an art gallery, actually, in the first floor of the embassy. And what we've been trying is not just to bring Peruvians, from Peru, artists, which sometimes, is a bit hard, but also to take advantage of Peruvians who live here in the US and who are, renowned already in their respective fields. And of course, we are trying to combine, photography and work exhibits and, music. So now, let's open our appetite a bit and talk about gastrodiplomacy, which is our second area of work, and one that I think we feel very proud of. I guess, one of the most gratifying and interesting ways of beginning to know a country is precisely through its food. And I have to say, very proudly as well, that Peruvian cuisine is considered one of the best in the world. There is a US, food critic who has already, said, that Peruvian cuisine is one of the best, and that is a fantastic example of fusion cuisine. And that is because of the result of Peruvian history itself. As you may know, we've been, of course, we were conquered by the Spaniards, but we also received immigration for many other, countries. from Africa, from China, from Japan. So, and some European countries as well, Italy and Germany. So all that has influenced our cuisine, and it has really made, it so rich and flavorful. So what we are doing as a government is, of course, trying to work on the internalization of Peruvian cuisine. And to do that, of course, we are we are working with our main national entity who is in charge of tourism and trade, which is PROMPERU. And of course, we are also working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs actually signed an agreement with our most prestigious gastronomical entity. It's a private entity, APEGA. And we are working on promoting. It's called, and I think it should be somewhere here. It's called the Global Council on Gastronomy. It's we are, of course, trying to get together, scholars, chefs, the media, and of course entrepreneurs to build, a sort of like a brand name for Peru that is a synonym of gastronomic excellence. We, of course, are also, the variety of food that we have is really amazing. And probably one of the things that I would like to share with you also is that it was last year that 2 Peruvian restaurants, were considered within the 50 best restaurants in the world. One of them is in the 4th place at the moment. It's called Central. And really, being there is a fantastic and so delightful experience. They are developing a whole program that, is a research project. And they go, within Peru, and they see which other ingredients from our, in our villages could be used, to prepare different and innovate on food. Peru Mucho Gusto is the program I was talking to you about that our National Tourism and Trade Agency is working. It's PROMPERU. We also, of course, participate in the main gastronomic events in the world. Of course, gastronomy is already part of all our main events at embassies and in all, official events. And we are, of course, bringing as well, Peruvian, famous Peruvian chefs as Peru's ambassadors brands. And this is the one I was talking to you about. You see, we created the Gastro Diplomacy Global Committee, which, is comprised by some personalities in Peru that are helping us to move forward in this endeavor. Of course, here in the U.S., we have, as part of our trade promotion efforts, we've always been participating in all the most famous food, fairs. But what we are doing now is focusing on the, gastronomic component of those fairs, and we are portraying Peruvian food, and we are, giving classes and lectures and organizing seminars. We are bringing chefs from Peru so they could teach chefs here in the U.S. to cook Peruvian food. And of course, to finish with gastronomy, which I think is a topic that is very dear to all Peruvians, and that we really consider has made a social revolution in my country, because it has involved and articulated the whole chain of production in food. And I don't know if you've heard about our chef Gaston Acurio, who was a visionary many years ago. He has started this vision of, making Peruvian cuisine a world-renowned cuisine, you know, that could be talked about everywhere and that could compete with Italian cuisine or French cuisine or Chinese. So I guess, you know, to finish this part, what I would highly recommend that, you know, that the best way of really enjoying food is trying it. And hopefully you'll have the opportunity to do that today at our lunch, you know, get-together. We've brought papas a la huancaína, which is a delicious, you know, entree. And of course, I would recommend you all to go and you know, try some very good Peruvian restaurants who are already in the city. You know, China Chilcano is one that was opened with, within the vision of Jose Andres, this famous chef who has already, you know, a chain of restaurants in the US. He's a very good friend of our famous chef Gaston Acurio, and I thought about, you know, creating a restaurant, opening a restaurant that sort of portrays Peruvian cuisine with an emphasis on our Asian influence, because it's Japanese and Chinese. And there is another one that is close here. It's also in DC, because some of the good Peruvian restaurants are more in Rockville, but there is another one that I would recommend that has opened recently, you know, just some months ago, and it's called Nazca Mochica, and it's in Pia Street. Anyway, I assure you are going to have a wonderful experience. And to finish with my presentation and sort of keep within the time, oops, let's see. We are entering to our innovative sort of, you know, section, digital diplomacy. Digital diplomacy, actually, I have to say that the Embassy of Peru here in DC was probably one of the first embassies to sort of have a department of digital diplomacy within its, you know, functional structure. And of course, that has been possible because of the wonderful, you know, professional, of course, assistance of my team who is here, you know, accompanying me, Rodolfo and Annie, who are part of the digital diplomacy department, and of course Arturo, who is our head of public diplomacy at the embassy, you know, without whom we, you know, this presentation would haven't been possible. So anyway, so this is an area that I think we've really made some progress on, and I wanted to share the things that, you know, the tools we are using at the moment. You know, we are working, of course, on social media, we are working on the web, and we are working on other, you know, platforms. On social media, we have actually updated our webpage, and through that webpage, you can access all our platforms, our digital platforms. We also have e-publications, of course. And for instance, with the web, as I was telling you, you can go there and you can, you know, we are working with Facebook, which is one of our most active platforms. We are working, of course, in we are Pinterest. We are, you know, working with Twitter. We are active also in LinkedIn, in Vimeo, you know, in YouTube, in Flickr. You know, we are also active, as I was telling you, in e-publications. And in this, I would like to highlight our last, and I would say, you know, very good product, which is our environmental magazine. Probably you know that we hosted the climate change conference last year, 2 years ago, and we are very committed on our climate change, you know, commitments and compromises. So this magazine is one that is distributed to all our contacts. Actually, you have more than 20,000 contacts in our web, in our contact list, and of course we are trying to, you know, add every time that we have meetings or that we met, you know, people to, you know, add them. You know, we also have our virtual gallery, and finally something that I wanted also to highlight within this area is this is probably our flagship, you know, publication. It's called Top 10 News Peru. It's a daily newsletter that Rodolfo came up with that brilliant idea. And I really, think it has been very successful. This goes to all our contact list, and it's a summary of the top 10, well, not top 10, but the 10 news in English about Peru. Because as you may know, for a country who is, of course, native Spanish speaking, here we have to do an extra effort to translate our messages so they could reach, a broader audience in English. So this has become a fantastic tool, and it's been so successful that even all our embassies in English-speaking countries are using this newsletter, to broadcast and to sort of make the presence of Peru more strong in their places. And there is also TV version of this newsletter that I think there is also a video on this, I think, which is just for you to have an idea. Oops. And it just sort of summarizes the titles of those news during the day. So with that, I think, I have finished with our presentation on this. And just as a conclusion, I would just like to share with you that I totally agree with what Nick has said and Linda as well. Public diplomacy, I think nowadays, given the change of international relations, given the multiple actors that take place, only could be, I think, properly, I would say, strengthened if we get together and add forces. We've done that. We've partnered with, as I was telling you, local prestigious institutions. We've also partnered with, for instance, international organizations like IDB and the World Bank, who have helped us, with more resources or with more people if we need it. We are trying to use also and take advantage of Peruvian diaspora, because the U.S. happens to be, the place where most Peruvians abroad are living, and of course they are. They are some of them are already nationalized, U.S. citizens, and are in very important, positions, whether within the administration or in different, positions in many states, and they of course do keep the love, through for Peru, and they are also helping us in spreading, and helping us in our activities. And of course, I agree. This is a teamwork, and that's the message that we have to sort of carry with us today. I have to thank again, to my team at the embassy, and of course also to you that made possible for us today, to talk to you about what Peru is doing in this area. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cecilia. Terrific. I'll go as fast as I can. Don't want to keep you from those Peruvian delicacies for lunch. It's quite funny. I wasn't asked to bring any British gastro delights. I don't need it, unfortunately. I would have happily brought a plate of Spam and chips for any of you. I will... For my case study, I will eventually focus on the way the British Council, which is Britain's official agency for cultural and educational and civil society and other engagement in the world, has, over the past 15 years, really, during this 21st century, moved from a focus around the concept of diplomacy much more to a focus around the words we've been using today, partnerships and relationships, and I'll try and explain what that means. But I'm also aware that today's event, and I applaud the organisers, particularly my friends at the Scottish Government, for making this happen. There's a particular interest in focusing on cultural diplomacy available to perhaps smaller countries, maybe countries which are nations within countries. So I thought I'd just start with a memory I have of a country where I was 5 years, which is small but very important, New Zealand. While I was in New Zealand, someone we worked with and knew quite well was Helen Clark, who is currently the head of UNDP and on the shortlist to replace Ban Ki-moon at the UN. And when Helen Clark, during our time there, became Prime Minister of New Zealand, I remember that she said, as she created her cabinet of ministers, that she would keep one ministry for herself. New prime ministers and presidents often do this. They often keep the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Economic Development or even Foreign Affairs very much within their own remit. But the ministry that Helen Clark kept for herself was the Ministry of Culture. And I thought that was a remarkable and amazing fact. And she said, we asked her, she said, "Oh, it's far too important to leave to anybody else. We're talking about our identity. We're talking about our meaning in the world. We're talking about our multi-ethnic constitution. This is what New Zealand is about." And I think that's a resonant thought as we talk about culture today, because certainly for us in the British Council, certainly for me personally, I think an extraordinary thing has happened since, I suppose, 9/11 was the critical world moment. And that is that culture has gone from being, in most people's minds, a marginal, important but marginal aspect of international relations, geopolitics and world issues, to actually being core and formative of modern politics and international relations. I like to think of it as like an ocean in which the surface waves and movements that we are all fixated on are the politics and the economics of the day. But underneath there are deep cultural undertows which are forming that surface movement. And it's the cultural undertows that are really the most important factors in the way the world is developing and going in the modern age. And when we talk about culture, of course, we're not just talking about arts. Arts, in fact, is the most individualistic and powerful expression of these cultural forces. We're talking about legacy and history. We're talking about religion. We're talking about language. We're talking about a people's development through their anthropology into their sociology. We're talking about family values. We're talking about all aspects of diversity and attitudes to gender and to sexuality and to religion and physical, mental disability. Above all, we're talking about identity. And I think in the modern world, when we talk about international relations and its most important question, and when we talk about the way culture is the undertow to that, we're talking about this word home. What do I call my home? Where am I entitled to call home? Who belongs in my home? Who doesn't belong in my home? And in a world on the move, a world of immigration, of diaspora, of refugeeism, of many nations reasserting their identity and who's part of the homeland, and that's a critical word, and who isn't part of the homeland, I think there you get a real nexus between the way the world is going and the importance of culture. So I would argue that the work of cultural diplomacy, cultural relations, is absolutely core to making the world work better, core to not just prosperity and influence, core to security in the modern world. And you know, I found this out myself. For a while, I was our director in Afghanistan. While I was in Afghanistan in 2011, one day, the Taliban Haqqani came early in the morning to the British Council compound in Kabul, and after 8 hours 17 people were dead, 12 people were in hospital. Our whole operation was destroyed. The only positive thing I learned on that day, which was the worst day in the British Council's history in 80 years, in 120 countries, by far the worst day in our history. The only positive thing I learned that day is if people are ready to kill themselves to stop you doing something, they must have decided that what you're doing is extremely important. And what we were doing was cultural relations. We were helping girls get back into school. We were helping to develop the Afghan civil society sector. We were helping to recreate a belief in Afghan music and performance possibilities in the visual arts. And that was so disliked that to materialize a phrase which suddenly became real that day, they heard the word culture and they literally reached for their gun. So the model the British Council has therefore sort of more developed over the past 15, 20 years, I feel, is one in which we don't actually use the phrase cultural diplomacy or public diplomacy or soft power. We recognise its significance, but it is a different thing from cultural relations, which is the phrase we use. Because what I think happens with diplomacy is you are subject to a more short-term, potentially politically influenced way of doing this work. Diplomacy, I assume, is the government of one country trying to benignly influence the government of another country, but primarily in its own interests. And I think public diplomacy, called cultural diplomacy, public diplomacy, then is the government of one country trying to benignly influence the people of another country. And that strikes me as potentially having maybe a propagandic element to it. What I think we've tried to move towards is a belief in this concept of cultural relations, in which we are an informed and experienced conduit and catalyst for the engagement between peoples, institutions, and cultures in maybe the two countries or the multiple countries we're trying to do it, instead of the primary initiator and organizer, the conduit, the advisor, so that you can have a more genuine people-to-people relationship. And there are two or three things that enable us to do that. And the first thing is that our model, the British Council, actually derives and has been the same model since 1934 when we were founded. And it was, so we've been going 80 plus years, as I say, in about 120 countries, with programs in about 150 countries, but presence in 120, but with by far the greatest number of our staff being, of which we have about 8,000, being of the countries in which we're operating. We were founded in 1934 by the British government, but to be independent. If you think about 1934, here you are in a Europe dominated by political ideologies, fascism, communism, Nazism, totalitarianism, various kinds. And what the British Foreign Office, in its, I believe, great wisdom at that time, said, let us show the world that when it comes to culture and education and people-to-people engagement, there are different ways of doing this work. We can still fund it, but let it operate with independence and autonomy so that there is less danger of the short-term political expedient of the government of the day influencing the way that cultural work is done. So the British Council was set up as an official and then a fully government-funded but independent organisation working to a chair and a board of trustees. My office is here, for instance, is in the British Embassy. I do not actually report to the British ambassador. And it's a very interesting model, which I recommend as the way of moving from cultural diplomacy to cultural relations. And it has enabled us to focus not on diplomacy, which is bound to, by the very nature of the word, have the current national and political interests of the officiating part of the initiating partner most in mind, and to genuinely say to cultures and peoples and societies, we really want our people to understand and know you better, so that we can find the means to trust, and hasn't that word come up a lot today, which we can nurture over a long period of time. I think great cultural relations work is both deep and long, and which can manifest itself in all kinds of different kinds of artistic and educational and social activity. But in order that we can, through that trust, begin to collaborate on the great world issues of our time. And I think that's the other factor behind the importance of cultural relations, the recognition that the world is, in the 21st century, there are no major issues in the world. All major issues in the world have to be globally addressed. There is no such thing as a significant local problem. It's not just new communications that make us aware of things. Anything political, economic, international relations, world issues, environment in the world today will influence everybody, and therefore you have to have a means of understanding other cultural, social, community viewpoints such that the means to collaboration can genuinely be developed. And I think that is the work of cultural relations. Indeed, I would say it's very interesting that we talk glibly of globalization, but clearly the world is globalizing and much more interdependent, particularly in the areas of economy and politics. And therefore, I think what we see in the modern world is a sort of reassertion against that globalizing of politics and economics in terms of culture. The cultures of the world, and I think this can be a very benign thing if handled the right way, the cultures of the world are reasserting their local identities in the face of the globalizing economics and politics of the world. And I think, again, it is the work of the cultural diplomats, the cultural relations people, to help navigate understanding of why that is happening. When we look at those areas of the world which are seeking secession or independence from their, as it were, host countries, like Scotland in my own country, you can see that it is based on old legacy lines, geographical lines of legacy and language and sense of separate identity. It is a cultural movement, perhaps even more than it is an economic or commercial or a political movement. And you could look at the same in Belgium, in Spain, and then obviously in, around the question of homelands of Palestine, Kurdistan, Pashtunia in, between Afghanistan and Pakistan. It's the old cultural legacy which is actually determining the new assertion of secession and independence. So again, in all these issues, I think it's cultural relations which are the deep undertow of what's going on. I'd even translate that into some of the biggest issues of our day. I mean, dare I say, in the American, primaries today, some people are saying of one candidate in particular that, where is the economic strategy? Where is the political strategy? To which the answer to a lot of people who are interested in such candidates are, we're not particularly interested in economic and political strategies. They're actually having a cultural response in terms of what is the identity of my nation? Who do I really think belongs in my nation? Who doesn't belong in my nation? Shall we build some walls? It's these questions of inclusion and exclusion, cultural questions, which I think are more powerfully determining the response of people. I also predict, I'm not meant to talk about Britain and Europe and Brexit at the moment, because we're in perdar, as we call it, but I think I can say something absolutely non-political here. My prediction is only this, that many of the people, when they go into the polling booth on the 23rd of June, is it? Yes, to vote whether Britain should or should not be in Europe, I think many of the people will close the curtain and they will look at that piece of paper, they will look at yes and no, and they will decide then. They will not be sure when they go in, because they will not have in their head, I have been convinced by these economic arguments, these commercial arguments, these TTIP arguments, these political arguments, that this is the way, this is best for Britain. They will be thinking, do I feel insular? Do I feel xenophobic? Do I feel embracing? Do I want the Queen on my banknote? What do I want my passport to look like? I think it's cultural questions that determine people's sense of what is their home, region, community, and identity. So, and the final thing I'd say about doing cultural relations is that you cannot separate the arts out from all the other great sectors which make up a culture. You cannot separate it from whatever initiatives and understanding you're engaging with in terms of education and the skilling of people, in terms of civil society and understanding of human rights, in the teaching of languages and the development of new kinds of communication. Cultural relations. Culture is a continuum of all these things. And the arts may be its most individualistic expression, but it is not culture on its own. And finally, I would say that when you that there are two real ways of doing cultural diplomacy, cultural relations, aren't there? There is the powerful showcasing of your country to make sure that the world understands it better. And that is a very important and a very legitimate part of that's what cultural diplomacy, to my mind, really is. But when you're really working in terms of cultural relations, you can start to focus much more on the many concepts of co-production and collaboration in which you can bring cultures together to find common cause and to celebrate the distinctions between them. And that, I think, is where you get that power of trust and intellectual and emotional understanding, which is what we need. So, sorry, that was a bit roundabout, but that's our model. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, in time-honoured profession, we have overrun greatly. It wasn't planned that way, so it just falls to me to do two things. One is say a few closing remarks, and also I'm told I will have to draw the raffle for the whiskey. I will be very brief, but I'll start by putting something on the record, I think, because the American presidential campaign has influenced some of the discussions this morning, and I think I should just put on record that Mr. Trump is half Scottish. Briefly, can I thank all our speakers for what has been, I think, has been a fascinating start to a conversation on cultural diplomacy, a conversation which I hope will continue amongst us. All of our guests are extremely busy people, and their willingness to join us here this morning is being greatly appreciated, so thank you so much. Can I also thank our partners who were instrumental in making this event possible, our friends and colleagues at the NYU Washington, D.C. campus, and also our colleagues from the EU delegation to the US who have been instrumental in behind the scenes in helping us formulate this program. Finally, can I give my thanks to all of you. We've been delighted to see so many of you here today. Thank you for your attendance and for your contributions. And we hope that this conversation will continue, and that starts immediately with our international flavoured lunch. I hope you use that as a really good networking opportunity.